What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Random Redshirt Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Zach, and hosting with me is the other host, kind of redundant, Chris. What's up, Chris?
Hello, everybody. Hello, Zach. Zach, outstanding to see you again, my great friend. It's great to be back. Yeah, awesome. Love doing the podcast as well. Thank you, everyone, for watching us. It's such a great experience and journey for us. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been a couple of weeks since we actually sat down and recorded. We are, I think, along with many other Trekkies, still kind of dealing with a Picard hangover. I know we just kind
Yeah,
of talked about that earlier, right? That we're kind of have this Picard hangover.
we do. I really feel like, I mean, it was so lovely to get those episodes week by week. And now I feel like I'm really missing something. I'm missing something. There's like a
A
hollowness right
void.
there. Yeah, a void. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think many others who are watching this or listening to this would agree.
Yeah.
That Picard, looking back, Chris, on that journey that we went through for season 3 of Picard, it was a big undertaking. You know, we were so ingrained into
Mhm.
Picard that it's like you're kind of coming out the other side going, "Whoa, what did I just experience? What did I just go through?" It was overwhelming, but in a good way.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, we were overwhelmed, I think, with emotion, with nostalgia of first and foremost, I think.
Mhm.
Happiness, joyfulness. I mean, so many things, even some moments of sadness, uh, just so many different things. And yeah, I'm still kind of feeling that a little bit. It's almost like I kind of have this deep down feeling like you would if you stayed up too late one night and then had to get up early the next morning and
Yeah,
you're really kind of tired and groggy, and you're like, that's kind of how I feel a little bit with the Picard. Um, I wish we had more.
I do. I do wish we had more as well. If you can see a little bit of the snout in the camera, sometimes some that's River if he decides to join the podcast. But yeah, Picard was it was an experience, right? Because like you and I, like watching TNG, the original TNG to begin with, we bring all of that experience with us when we see Picard. So we're re-experiencing our memories and how we felt when we were younger. Plus, we're seeing this whole new thing with Picard kind of unfold in front of us, and we're we're understanding and going through all these themes like together. It was such like a transcendental like experience going through it. You're right, like so much depth we went into and analysis and emotion, and just thought that went through it. Was like, wow, it was heavy, right? It was
That might be the right
yeah,
word, heavy.
yeah,
Maybe that's what it is. You just this over all the overwhelming emotions and feelings, and because we went through it episode by episode and really dove deep into it for the first time on our podcast, we did an episode
yeah.
by episode review. We hadn't done that before, and I think the response that we got from our viewers and our listeners was just overwhelming. And so I think that's something that we have to look forward to in the future, and we do. If you liked our episode by episode deep dive of Picard, and we loved doing it, it
Hmm.
was so awesome to go on that journey. Had we just watched the first episode and then tried to come back and talk about the whole season, that'd have been like a 12-hour episode. We might as well have just done it episode by episode. But
Yeah,
um, we're gonna do this again though. We're
yeah,
doing it for Star Trek Strange New Worlds, and we cannot wait to do that and bring it to you. That's going to be a little bit of a different flavor, though, Chris, right? Because that's more episodic,
yeah.
more toss style, new adventure every week. There'll be some, you know, strands of story arc and character development throughout, but in general, we'll be able to really dive in and focus on one specific episode without having to recall the minute details of the first, X number of episodes before that.
Yeah, I'm so looking forward to that as well, because like each episode is going to have, I'm sure it's going to have its own like dilemma and morality problems, and
Yep.
its own kind of excitement. So it's going to be lots of fun. I do hope that we probably both want to both see more Gorn. I do hope we see
Yeah.
more
Oh,
Gorn.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, in the trailer that they have released so far, there
Oh.
is like a half a second clip of somebody, and I have to go back and freeze frame it. It might be Leon with a Gorn right in their face.
Oh,
So
nice.
we know we're going to get the Gorn again. I think that's going to be as long as this show keeps getting made, which they did renew it for a third season, which is awesome.
Nice.
As long as they keep making it, I think we're going to keep getting the Gorn as a recurring bad guy, kind of like the Klingons. And they bring the Klingons back too, the way we're meant to see them, not the way they look in
Okay.
Discovery, not the way they look in TOS, like the way we're used to seeing them in Enterprise and DS9 and TNG and Voyager and all that stuff. So it should be
Okay.
great.
Excellent.
But yeah, we're really looking forward to doing that. I know you and I, Chris, really both loved season 1 of Strange New Worlds, and
Yeah.
I know a lot of you out there did as well. So we can't wait to bring that episode by episode review for you, coming very soon, as the first episode, I believe, is out June 15th. I want to say it's like mid-June, I think.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
about a month, a little over a month away from the premiere of season 2. And the fact they're getting season 3 is even better. So we have that to look forward to probably sometime next year. But that being said, we are now going to jump back a little bit into our look, because it's been a while since we did our first show overview or show discussion of Star Trek Voyager, and we're going to jump back into the Delta Quadrant here
Yeah.
and do part 2 of our look at Voyager as we do seasons 3 through 5. For those of you watching or listening, we thank you so much for tuning in or watching us on YouTube. If you have watched our show before, you will know that we have gone through each season of our podcast, doing each Star Trek series, just an overview and talking about some of our favorite episodes. And we do a different show each season. So season 5 of our podcast will feature the show Star Trek Enterprise. And we can't wait to bring you some fantastic guests for that. And so season 4, we're doing Star Trek Voyager. We did part 1 of Star Trek Voyager. It seems like
Way back. It seems. Yeah.
12 years ago now at this point. But it was a while back, and you can catch that that episode of Voyager part 1 down below on YouTube in one of our previous videos, or you can go back and find it on any of your favorite podcast platforms. If this is your first time to the Random Red Shirt podcast, we welcome you and thank you to those of you in 30 plus countries around the world listening and or watching us on YouTube. We very much appreciate that. And we're a couple of nerdy guys who love talking about all things science fiction, talk a lot about Star Trek, Star Wars, and everything in between. And we do very much appreciate you and your support. Yeah. If you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell button for notifications if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, you can follow us there. Or if you want to see the video version of this, you can go on YouTube and watch it. Now, understand, if this is your first time, or maybe you have listened to us before, audio only, not all of our episodes on YouTube are video, or not all the episodes we've done in the past are on YouTube. Only the ones we've been doing with video, which has been the past, I think, 4 to 5 months. A lot of our episodes initially were audio only. So just be aware of that. If you are watching us on YouTube, you can go back to your favorite podcast platform and listen to all the episodes we've done. And there's been some fantastic ones, a lot of great stuff, a lot of awesome celebrity guest interviews waiting for you to listen to. So with that being said, the business out of the way, Chris, we should do something we haven't done in a while, and that's a little need to know.
Need to know. Yeah, that's right.
Picard was so jam-packed, we just didn't have time to squeeze it in. So let's do it, Chris. What's the first thing our audience needs to know this week as of May 6th?
You know what I saw? I think it was a week or a couple weeks ago. It was the new Flash trailer, and I loved it. I shared that with you. And I think when I first saw it, I was not expecting to see so much Batman in it, and our favorite Batman, Michael Keaton Batman. And when you hear his voiceover, I was like, yes. You hear I loved his voiceover. And then when he there was that, and then he said a phrase that I loved. He said, it was something like, you want to get nuts, or are you ready to get nuts?
Yeah.
I loved that. So that was like, it was completely unexpected for me. I didn't really have much desire to see the new Flash movie coming out. I know there's been some controversy around Flash, but when I saw that, and I saw that much Batman, Michael Keaton and Ben Affleck, and I know I like Ben, I'm fine with the Ben Affleck Batman, but I was like, oh, this looks great. And I'm just thinking, I hope in this Flash movie there is as much Batman as we see in the trailer, because I thought that was awesome. What'd you think?
Yeah. So in general, DC has really, I think, struggled to hit the mark with their movies.
Yeah.
Their shows, however, have been amazing. You've had Arrow, you've had Flash, you've had Supergirl, you've had Gotham, you've had the Legends of Tomorrow. My gosh, there's so many shows they've had, and a lot of them have been really, really good. That whole, they call it like the Arrowverse and stuff like that, and the multiverse and things.
Yeah.
A lot of crossover event with those shows have been really fantastic. In fact, Arrow and Gotham are two of my favorite superhero type shows ever. They've just been so good. But their movies have been really hit or miss, really hit or miss. Most of them have been misses. So I'm a little bit skeptical, and I'm trying to reserve my emotions having seen Keaton in this because of the DC movie. Now, that being said, I hope it's fantastic. We haven't seen Keaton on screen as Batman since Batman Returns, which was like, what, 1991, 92, something like that.
Yeah.
So the other thing I'm curious is I hope that Keaton's Batman is not the same Batman we saw in those two movies. He's older now. I hope to see change, right? The character should be different. The Bruce Wayne / Batman in this Flash movie from Keaton should be different than what we got in those two movies. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. I am very excited though. Keaton is my Batman. I know people say, "Oh, could you say Christian Bale's the best Batman?" Well, he's fantastic. I mean, other than the laryngitis, he's fantastic. But Keaton's my Batman. He's your Batman too. I know that.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
I got very, very giddy the more I saw him on screen. The more I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of us guys who grew up with Keaton and gals who grew up with Keaton who are gonna go watch the Flash movie because he's in it as Batman. I mean, let's be honest. No one's going to see the guy as Flash, Ezra Bridger or whatever the guy's name is. It's not his name. Ezra Miller. Anyways,
Yeah. Something like that.
the guy, yeah, he got in a bunch of trouble, legal trouble, out in his personal life, and that's what caused all the controversy. But anyway, so yeah, I'm very, very excited for this movie, and I can't wait to see it.
Michael Keaton looked good. I have to say,
Oh
he
yeah,
looked really good.
yeah. I'm a huge Keaton fan, and it's not just Batman. He's done a lot of fantastic roles. He's just, I mean, I know he's a bit quirky in real life from what I've been told, but he's a hell of an actor.
Yeah.
He can do so many characters. He's so good at comedy. Very underrated comedian in that regard, like doing comedy. So
Nice.
yeah.
What's our next need to know? Our next need to know has one of your favorite characters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So yesterday on Revenge of the Fifth, aka May 5th, Guardians of the Galaxy came out, Volume 3. And this is a movie that's been in the making for, I think, a couple of years now. I'm really excited to go see that eventually. I love the Guardians movies. They have the best soundtracks of any of the Marvel movies, I think. And it's got Chris Pratt in it. How can you not love Chris Pratt? Dude's just, I mean, he's a rock star. And Star-Lord is definitely, him and Iron Man are probably my two favorite Marvel characters. So very easy to want to go see this. Lot of, I mean, it's such a huge cast, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got Dave Bautista as Drax. You've got Bradley Cooper, who does the voice of Rocket. You have Chris Pratt. You have your girl Karen Gillian from Doctor Who.
That's right.
No, she was one of the companions for Matt Smith, Amy Pond, right? And you have Zoe Saldana as Gamora. I mean, Vin Diesel is the voice of Groot, which I know he only says the same thing over and over again. I am Groot, but yeah, they're great movies. The Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special wasn't the greatest, but it was still fun, entertaining. So yeah. Okay, Chris, what's the last thing our audience needs to know this week as of May 6th, 2023?
Last thing for our need to know is in the form of our comic book graphic novel. So I finished reading the DC graphic novel called Supergirl World of Tomorrow. That is a graphic novel by Tom King, and I'd heard excellent things about it. And I did read it and finished it recently, and I can say it is excellent, and I really, really liked it. It is a different take on Supergirl. I really recommend it, especially if you know and you like Tom King, definitely watch it. If you know nothing about Supergirl, excuse me, don't watch it, read it. Definitely read it. But just a little short synopsis and like why I loved it is, so Supergirl acts as a mentor for a young girl that has experienced like a great tragedy. This young girl lost her father. Her father was murdered. But in this kind of exploration, they see all types of different evil kind of in the
Mm.
galaxy. And you get this really kind of interesting look at Supergirl. And the end of it is just fantastic. So
Mm.
I don't want to spoil it, but I want to say it's outstanding.
Is it an alternate reality, alternate universe Supergirl, or is it in the her normal timeline?
Normal timeline. Normal
Okay,
timeline. Yeah.
because the name Supergirl World of Tomorrow makes me kind of feel like it would be an alternate reality or something.
That's a good question. I don't know where the title, how that title was derived. So I gotta
Yeah.
look into that more.
Did it not really tie into the story at all? Like it didn't, there's no connection.
Man, maybe that like totally went over my head. But yeah, I didn't see that like tied into the story. But
Gotcha.
this beautiful story about Supergirl not only being like a mentor and guiding this young girl, but exploration of like evil in the galaxy, and at the end of it, this realization that all through that they had hope. So it was
Mm,
evil, but in the midst of evil, there's hope. So
nice. That's
yeah,
awesome. Yeah,
yeah.
that's great. All right. Well, Chris, let's jump into the Delta Quadrant
The
again,
Delta
and
Quadrant.
let's jump back to Star Trek Voyager. We had a great time doing our Star Trek Picard. Want to thank Jenny Johnson again for being on with us during those episodes. A lot of fun. She brought a great perspective. She brought some insight and some detail in some of those episodes that you and I just straight up missed.
Oh yeah, and
So that was wonderful.
yeah, her knowledge, and she educated us on the Borg because we were lost. I was like, the Borg, on the Borg in the Borg history. I don't know.
Not the first
Yeah,
time I've been lost, but anyways.
yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. So, all right, Delta Quadrant, Star Trek Voyager. Uh, if you go back and if you're watching or listening to this, feel free to go back and look at our part 1 discussion on the Star Trek Voyager series, as we kind of give an overview of the show. And again, this isn't anything like it's new content. If you're watching this, you probably have seen Star Trek Voyager before. But this is just kind of our view and our thoughts on the series as a whole, the different seasons, some of our favorite episodes. And maybe there's certain ones that you might agree with or ones that we missed. You're like, how could you not talk about this one? Because that was my favorite. Well, we're not going to talk about every episode. We're not doing a deep dive. This is more of a skimming the wave tops, if you will. So that being said, Chris, let's start with season 3. Give me some episodes for you that either were your favorite or that you really enjoyed or that really stood out to you for any number of reasons.
Yeah. Oh, in season 3, one of my favorites is the two-parter, and so the two-parters. It's really interesting. Like Voyager, throughout the seasons, has a whole bunch of two-parters. So that's what I really appreciate about the uniqueness of Voyagers. It's kind of like you've got all these mini Voyager movies throughout the Voyager series. So that's cool.
Mm,
Futures End Part 1 and 2. I
yeah.
thought was cool, right? So the beginning, you've got this ship that comes in, and you find out it's like a time ship, and they end up going back into, and I think it was the 90s of Earth,
What a surprise.
um, to kind of deal with the problems they've got in that episode. So I know that yeah, they go down. I think it was L.A. I think it was
Yeah.
L.A. And you've got you've got kind of a CEO that has used some technology from the future to make his fortunes and become kind of a tech fortune CEO. And so I thought it was neat because you've got Tom Paris down there in LA, and so is Captain Janeway, so is Tuvok. The Doctor makes it down as well and creates some shenanigans and some hijinks down there as well. So I really appreciate it. It was kind of neat, they're back on Earth, different, like a new environment for them. And um, Tom Paris is he's a history aficionado, so he knows all of these things about kind of that time period around Earth, but he kind of gets it wrong, because he kind of gets the years wrong on some of the stuff that
Yeah, I
he's
think
talking about.
I think
Yeah,
specifically he was I think he was really drawn to the 20th century, right?
yeah,
Like 1900 to 2000, that kind of range, because he mentions stuff in previous episodes from like the 30s and 40s, and he's a big fan, Captain Proton, right? I mean, that's a
Yeah.
black and white holographic novel or a series or whatever, right? I think that's supposed to be kind of like 1940s, 1950s esque. So
Yeah.
the 20th century is kind of his forte, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And it was just fun. I thought that episode was like a lot of fun, and seeing how they have to get out of that dilemma of being back there in time and trying to save the future too. Um, it's fun. We meet like I forget the name of the young lady that's the character, but she's an astrophysicist or an astronomer that works at the LA planetarium. I
Yeah.
might be getting it wrong, but that was she provided a romantic interest for Tom Paris, so it was great. I really that one felt it was easy to watch for me. It didn't feel like it was too heavy. Like the themes were not too heavy. So I like that you can just enjoy it and relax a bit. Well, that was one of my favorites from season 3 for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that episode you brought up, Chris,
Yeah.
because I believe in the beginning of that episode, part one, you see I can't remember the guy's first name, Starling, I think is his last name, and
Yeah.
he's like when the futuristic ship crash lands in the woods, he's like this like dude out in the woods, a hippie or something. I don't even know what
Yeah.
he is.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
he's out there, and that's how he comes across this technology. And if that hadn't happened, he probably wouldn't have made it to where he was, right? He wouldn't be
yeah.
this. I think ChronoWorks Industries was the name of the company that was his, that he was using to take this future technology and invent new things and just become this super rich guy.
That's right.
I think the name of the actor it's like Ed Begley or something like Ed Bagley or something like that. He's been in quite a few things. Very good actor. Um, and I would agree with you. It's a very fun episode. It's an adventure kind of one, right? Like
Yeah.
one of those classic Star Trek adventure episodes.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. You're like fun. That was a great way to put it. An adventure.
Yeah.
Sometimes you got to take a break from the really heavy ones, that are
Yeah.
really take an emotional, that are heavy emotionally. So that's good.
And I think they've done a good job of that throughout the different series, right? You get
Yeah.
the fun, like in TNG, right? You get things like the holodeck episode with Robin Hood, and
Yeah.
I must protest, Captain. I am not a merry man.
Yeah.
Just fun things like that. And this is, I think, kind of certainly one of those fun episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I want to get your opinion, but one of the ones that I know that is in our notes from season 3 that might be a little bit more heavy is the one with Harry and Tom called The Shoot.
Mm,
No, that
yeah.
one's a bit more heavy, right? That
Yeah.
kind of gets so. But that was a noticeable one from season 3. Um, is that the one where they were detained somewhere, right? In a prison or close to that?
Yeah. I don't remember if they explain why they were detained or what they were found guilty of. They may have, but it's been a while since I've watched it.
Hmm.
But yeah, they were detained. They were found guilty. They're put into this prison, and I guess there was some neural implant or whatever that slowly drives the inmates mad, and you have all these
Yeah.
these inmates packed into this fairly small area, and they're jockeying and fighting over areas in which to sleep, and then the food comes down the chute, like the name, and they
Yeah.
have to kind of fight over it to who gets food first or who gets the food at all, and they start, it's a dark episode in the sense it's dealing a lot with like, okay, prison life or death, survival, um and to a certain extent some mental health stuff a little bit in that I can remember. Yeah, it's a bit of a heavy episode for sure.
Yeah. And that the one I'm not certain about this, but I want to say that after this episode, Harry's and Tom's relationship maybe gets closer. Um, and then I know that one of them is injured. I want to say like either Tom is injured. I think it was
I think
Tom.
Harry, I thought Harry was injured,
Oh, Harry was injured.
and then Tom had to like nurse him back, maybe. I don't remember off the top of my head, but
Yeah,
you're
it was
right,
something like
one
that.
of them is injured. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I felt that one was hard for me to watch. I think I've actually seen it like a couple times, But
Mm.
like the first time I saw it, I don't think I was able to finish it. Actually, I was like, okay, this is a little bit um just hard for me to, for some reason, was hard for me to watch, and I felt kind of, I felt claustrophobic a little bit when I was watching it too,
Mm.
for some reason. But yeah, that one was pretty intense for Harry and Tom's relationship. But
You know what? You were right. I just looked up. Tom is the one that's injured
Tom is the one.
because
Yeah,
there's another prisoner that tells Harry that he should kill Paris because he's a drain on resources, and
yeah,
even offers him a knife to kill him. So there's a lot to unpack in this episode. Yeah.
yeah. There is, you know, and I just thought of like of a reason why it made me uncomfortable. It made me uncomfortable because I felt like there was not a sense of hope in it. So like
Mm,
they're right, they're just in this predicament. It just felt so hopeless, and I think that's why it was hard for me to watch.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good episode. I actually there was an episode that I enjoyed. It's a little bit of a lighter episode,
Mhm.
called False Prophets. And this is where we see some very familiar Alpha Quadrant aliens in this. And in fact, if you remember, Chris, uh, this episode actually explains, and of course, if you guys have seen the episode, you know it's the Ferengi. But what's cool is the tie back to the next generation in this, because they use this episode to explain what happened to those two Ferengi that went through that wormhole in the TNG episode called The Price, and they go through and the wormhole closes behind them and you never see them again. And then we find out
Ah,
these are the two Ferengi. They went through that wormhole and they've been stuck in the Delta Quadrant, and they've been basically milking these inhabitants of this planet that they've come across because they don't have the technology. They're very easily fooled, and they've tricked them into thinking they're gods and all this stuff because they have all this technology that makes them look magical and everything. And it's a fun episode. Very very Ferengi-esque, right? The Ferengis are all about the latinum and the money and the treasures, and they have this. Yeah, it's very good.
remember that? Yeah,
Until the Voyager crew exposes them.
and those the Voyager crew. Yeah, they
Yeah,
just ruined it for those
I
Ferengis.
know.
Yeah,
What a party poopers,
I
man.
know, I know. Yeah, those guys, those Ferengis made a nice kind of sweet deal for themselves on that planet. I remember that. That was funny.
Yeah, they had a little bit of a monopoly going there. There was nobody else getting that treasure, right? They kind of
Yeah,
own that area. So, but that was a fun one. I thought that was another, you know, I mean, anytime you have the Ferengi involved in Star Trek anymore, it's very it's usually pretty fun. There were some pretty heavy episodes with the Ferengi and DS9.
yeah,
But in general, a lot of the Ferengi episodes are fun, a lot of lightheartedness, and this was certainly one of those.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. You're right. Definitely fun
yeah.
to watch. Definitely fun to watch. So we have one of our favorite. I don't know if we'd call him a villain, but sometimes he's definitely an antagonist. We have Q making his way into Voyager as well, which I think is awesome because I think it's cool to have Q. And that one, his first episode that he makes an appearance is like the Q in the Gray. Is
Yeah, was
that
that
right?
his first appearance in Voyager? I thought it was, but I couldn't remember.
You know, I can't really remember either. Maybe some of our viewers
This is
can.
becoming a
Yeah,
problem here, Chris. There's a common theme.
I don't
I
know.
can't remember. I can't remember.
Totally. Yeah,
It's okay.
you know, yeah. Well, you know, we're two professionals. There's so much we got to remember. So, right, we
We're
can't start
nothing if not authentic, are we not?
right. Was this the one? Someone's gonna correct us, but I can't remember if this was the first one or if the first one where he's asking Captain Janeway to be like the mother of the mother of his child. The Q
Yeah,
Gray.
that's a
Or is this
really good question.
or is it this one?
Um, yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. I know there's an episode in Voyager where he shows up
Yeah.
because there's another Q known as Quinn who's trying to seek asylum, and then he wants to commit suicide, right? And
Oh yeah.
I
That
don't remember if that one came first or not.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
regardless, I mean that's kind of semantics at this point. The fact of the matter is, it's another Q episode.
Yeah. And when we talk about like, yeah, we think Janeway would probably be a good mother for Q's child for sure.
Yeah, I don't know, because I don't think Janeway would put up with Q's crap. You look
Yeah.
at the three captains that Q messed with, right? Picard, Cisco, and Janeway.
Yeah.
And of all those three, I feel like Picard gave Q the longest leash. Cisco, it only took him one time. He punched Q in the
Punched
face,
him.
and that was it.
Mhm.
The running gag that how Q harasses Picard and all Cisco does punch him in the face. Well, Janeway doesn't really have much patience for him either. I think she'd heard about him
Yeah.
because of Picard and things like that. So, she didn't have much patience for him.
No. No. But yeah, but he does show up in a few episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I will say, Chris, as we're looking at season 3 here,
Mhm.
I think the beginning or the end of season 3 and the beginning of season 4, another 2-part episode called Scorpion, is maybe the most pivotal episode of the series. And
Yeah.
here's why. So this show happens, part 1 of Scorpion happens, and we lose a member of the crew. She evolves or changes to a higher state or something. I don't know. I wasn't a fan of it.
Yeah.
But we lose Kess, and I think a lot of people like Kess quite a bit. I was always a fan of Kess, because I thought she was a very sweet character. She brought a lot to the crew. This idea of Ocampa's not living very long, so at 2 years old, she's going through this change to have kids, or have to decide if she's going to have kids or not. Which I think we talked about that
Mhm.
in our first part of Voyager that we looked at, part 1. I think that episode was in season 2, maybe. Anyways, but in this episode, Scorpion, not only do we lose her, but now we gain a character into Star Trek Voyager that not only becomes a pivotal main character and something that shapes many future episodes and brings back a very familiar villain, and that is Seven of Nine,
Yeah,
who
absolutely.
shows up as a Borg drone, because she's not who we know her to be. But then, of course, we also know this carries on to Star Trek Picard, right?
Yep.
Because without Seven, that changes the whole dynamic in many ways of Star Trek Picard throughout all 3 seasons. And so we're introduced to Seven of Nine, tertiary adjunct to Unimatrix 01. And because of the introduction of Seven of Nine, it also brings with it an absolutely frightening foe of the Borg. If
Yep.
you remember, species 8472, these beings that live, did they call it in like fluidic space,
Fluidic.
or
Yep.
yeah, fluidic
Fluidic
space?
space. Yeah.
And the Borg are scared to death of these things.
Yeah.
And these things, their ships, their technology, they rip through Borg cubes like tissue paper.
Yeah.
I mean, they are incredibly dangerous. And I believe Harry Kim is even injured by one. He gets like cut by one or hit by one, and just his whole body starts, I think, shutting down, or they just destroying him basically. And so I don't know. What are your thoughts on the Scorpion part 1 and 2? Do you feel kind of the same way I do? Do you have different thoughts about the absolute importance now, looking back after having watched all of Picard seasons 1 through 3,
Mm-hmm.
the importance of what Scorpion part 1 and 2 does as far as the introduction into the Star Trek universe?
I feel very similarly to you. Yeah. Yep. Scorpion 1 and 2, its effect on the entire Star Trek universe, definitely introducing Seven, um, and introducing Seven being a former drone, and kind of that perspective kind of changes
Well,
like
initially she is a drone,
she
right?
is a drone. Yes.
They
Yes.
they bring her on
Yeah.
board Voyager to help fight against species 8472, and she's still a drone while she's on the ship initially. So
Yep. Exactly.
that was very interesting.
Yeah. And we get to see, because she is a drone and then came out of that, right? We get to see so much kind of Borg uh, unwrapping of Borg history and Borg technology, and all the Borgness that comes with it. But also Seven provided this counterpoint to Janeway. So because I had read in and actually in this Star Trek Voyager a celebration book, like they wanted to bring in a character to contrast Janeway, just like Spock would contrast Kirk. So,
Yeah.
or Data would contrast Picard. So Janeway needed that, and so in that they found Seven, like a character to contrast Janeway, and Janeway also to act like as a mother, a kind of mother figure to Seven as well, and so that that carried on to the rest of the seasons, um, including some dynamics where because later we know Seven is unique, um, and we know that Seven is also important to the Borg Queen. So you kind of get to see this triangular setup where Seven's unique, but you have the Borg Queen wanting Seven, but you also have Janeway wanting Seven and do everything that she can to take Seven too. Um, and some neat things I think about. I'm sorry to go on about all of this about Janeway and Seven, but some kind of neat things in
No, it's important. It's
yeah
important. Yeah.
in Janeway's relationship with Seven is when Seven is I mean she's Borg and she identifies as Borg and is rejecting humanity at first when when she's first realizes she's separated from the collective and part of Voyager. She is rejecting humanity, um, and wants to stay with the Borg. But it's really interesting because Janeway is at that point she does not allow Seven to make independent decisions. So
Yeah.
I thought okay, that's interesting because she goes well, is not um, Seven is not mature enough as a human to make those independent decisions. So I will make them for her for now. So I thought that was a really interesting take. Um, and I like that Janeway said that a lot. But it sure does Seven's presence sure does set up a lot of really, really interesting back and forths between Janeway and Seven. And again, I feel I had read in this book that some of the writers felt that Janeway's kind of the mother figure, and I felt yeah when I watch Voyager now I could kind of I could kind of see that really well. So um, def definitely Scorpion 1 and 2 I think transformed a lot of Star Trek, but also the villains, the species. I'm gonna get the name wrong. Species 8472. Did I get that
Yep.
right?
You got it
They're
right. Yep.
awesome, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're awesome. Like as a another villain, and we learn later that the Borg actually tried to invade their space, um, and then I think Species 8472. Uh, yeah, we have some more future episodes with them to kind of explore their background, because I think Species 8472 they have ideas where they want to infiltrate the Federation or Voyager or something like that, and then we've got the space station where there's some sort of training simulation where they're like they're being Starfleet crew. But I thought they're a great villain to have another species in this race, and I would be very curious. Like I think they'd be cool to bring back in whatever future Star Trek series we might have where it's appropriate to bring them back because there's a lot to unpack there. There's a lot of history that they could go there. I still don't know what fluidic space is. I'm not sure any of us do.
No, nobody knows. I will say I like
Yeah.
this. I saw this comment that Brandon Braga made.
Yeah.
He's a writer, and then he was also kind of the showrunner, I believe, on Star Trek Enterprise. And he said about Scorpion, the two-parter, he said he was happy with the two-parter, citing it in 2003. That was among his favorites from the entirety of Voyager. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry, no, he said Scorpion. I read the wrong quote. Sorry. Scorpion was definitely, this is Brendan Braga saying this, for me, a defining moment in the series. That was when 7 of 9 came in. That was our first huge two-parter. We pulled out all the stops. By the way, their series finale, series premiere. So there people had to wait, right? They had to wait in between that back in the day. a two-parter with actually a satisfying ending, and to me, that was a turning point creatively. The show started to come into its own. So I think you see Scorpion the end of season 3 going into season 4, and it begins to define the series. And actually, they didn't know this back then, but it kind of started to it's begun to define new series, right? New Star Trek shows, in this case Picard, because without 7 of 9, Picard is a very, very different show.
Yeah.
Very different show. And so Scorpion part 1 and part 2, in my opinion, is two-part episode, is some of the most influential episodes from the whole series and in the franchise too.
So it is to Voyager, Scorpion Part 1 and Part 2 is to Voyager what to TNG was for I'm gonna get the episode name wrong, but the Battle of Wolf 439.
Oh, Wolf 359? Yeah.
359. Gosh.
Yeah. A lot of numbers were thrown on 8472, 359. Yeah.
Well, that's how my mind works. Like when I say like 7 of Mom's 9.
7 of Mom's.
That's how my mind works. I get those words jumbled.
No, it happens. It happens. Yeah. No, I think you're right there.
Yeah.
This is a pivotal moment because you see the Federation for the first time ever making a temporary alliance with the Borg.
Mm-hmm.
Because by doing that, it helps them get through Borg space, right? The Borg agree to let them go through their space if they help them against species 8472. And 7 of 9 becomes kind of this not an ambassador, but almost a representative of the Borg collective on Voyager before they, pull her plug and disengage her from the Borg.
Yeah.
And so that it's a turning moment because I believe in part 2 is where they eventually at the end of it, I think, or towards the end, they pull the plug and then she starts to become an individual and things like that. So it's a defining moment for a character, for a series, and for a franchise going forward, I think. Yeah. But that leads us into season 4, right? Season 4 has some really fantastic episodes. And I think Scorpion part 1 and 2 really does give Voyager its legs.
Yeah.
You kind of mentioned it with the Battle Wolf 359. I think the best of both worlds, part 1 and 2, is what gives the legs to TNG, and then TNG just explodes after that. I think the same thing here with Voyager. I think this is a common denominator. I think DS9 even has that to some extent, although I wouldn't necessarily consider it, season premiere, season finale, but well, kind of. But it's not a two-parter, but the episode The Dominion, or sorry, the Jem'Hadar, which is the season finale of season 2, introduces the Jem'Hadar and the Dominion, which becomes the big story arc for the entire series, leads to the war, and that's a massive changing event in that series. So just like DS9 had kind of one, TNG had one with Best of Both Worlds, this I think has one with Scorpion part 1 and 2.
Yeah.
But season 4, Chris, what are some things? What are some episodes that stand out to you? I know a couple, but there are a few in season 4 I think that are pretty influential and substantial.
Yeah, it's gonna be definitely gonna be the other two-parter for me in season 4. It's gonna be the Year of Hell part 1 and 2. That one that still like sticks in my memory. So that the Year of Hell part 1 and 2, you could extract that and it almost could be its own like Voyager movie. Right?
Yeah.
You don't have to know anything about any of the other seasons of Voyager. It's just that you take that two-parter, and I thought it was an incredible two-parter. I mean, not only it was very, very original. Not only you have introduce these new, I guess you could call them villains or antagonists, the Krenin, if I get the name right.
Krenim, yeah. The Krenim Imperium, yeah.
Krenin Imperium, and you have the leader of the time ship, where he's using that time ship as a weapon to like eliminate species like completely, so he can change the timeline to not only make the Krenin thrive, because he wants to have the Krenin be really strong in that particular quadrant, but he's also trying to restore. You find out tragically that he lost his family when he first used that weapon. So he's spending the last like 200 years in his time ship trying to gain them back by doing all of these other time manipulations and destroying or eliminating these different species through time. But we see the Voyager get caught up in this, and then caught up in a conflict, and then in a conflict with the Krenin, right? I think they and
Yeah, and their technology is pretty vastly superior to Voyager's ship.
yeah,
They
they are.
have some potent weapons.
They do. So
And
for
oh, by the way, they can use the timeline to wipe Voyager out.
yeah,
It's
that's right.
a giant time bomb in a sense, this ship, what they can do with it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And and they have, and they're going through a year of all of this adversity, right? With the Krenin, and you just see them. They are pummeled and pummeled and pummeled, and the ship is just totally battered, and their morale is battered, and they lose people. But what I like about it are the very kind of the close and the intimate moments of these episodes, that the Year of Hell Part 1 and 2. You see, there's a few of these. You see Tuvok's injured and through it, and he's blind. And you see these very kind of intimate moments where Seven of Nine is trying to take care of Tuvok,
Mm-hmm.
and tend to him. And Tuvok is very much feeling like, hey, I can take care of myself. But what I like about that is you see the concern on Seven Nine's face, and she says, hey, I told you I could help you, um, do with your personal grooming, because there's this like special moment where Tuvok cuts himself shaving, and you see the expression on her face, and she's helping him dress, and she's helping him walk. So I thought that was very neat. You see these the stress build up so much, and I thought was great. Like there's this moment with Chakotay and Captain Janeway where Chakotay says, hey, it's your birthday, happy birthday, and he wants to give her this really really nice like pocket watch that he replicated, and you see Janeway's reaction, like is like, oh, it's my birthday, and like, and why did you make that watch? You're using your resources to make that watch. But what we see from Janeway that I thought was great was you see this um all this stress kind of come on Janeway, and I felt like this kind of deterioration, like of Janeway, and we see this really really interesting side, like of Janeway, because she is really stubborn, like really relentless, and then really um she feels, when she makes up her mind, this is interesting about Janeway. When she makes up her mind, no one can change her usually from her decision, and so she might be willing to take the ship, because I think Chakotay tries to give her all these different options or different point of view, and she doesn't take it. So she's willing to go and take everyone at great risk, when she's met, kind of she's set her mind in some places. So for me, that was interesting that we saw this. I felt like a mental deterioration of Janeway, because she's almost been traumatically like affected. And there's this interesting scene with the doctor where he's pointing this out to her, and he says, hey, I'm relieving you of command, and he relieves her of command. And she just she goes, well, who's going to enforce what you just did? No one's going to enforce it. And you're
It's
not
kind
going
of
to
where
take.
you see, yeah, it's kind of where you see Janeway go, yeah, we're in the Delta Quadrant. Who's gonna stop me? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like she's finally kind of settling into this idea where it's like it can't all be by the book anymore.
Yeah, that's a good, interesting
Because we talked
contrast, right?
about
Yeah.
that, right? When
Yeah,
we
we
talked
did.
about Voyager and in our part one look, about how in the very beginning, those first couple seasons, she is so bent on doing everything by the Starfleet regulations, by the books, by Starfleet. And yet you have a lot of people or part of the crew that were former Maquis, and they're like, whoa, hang on a second.
Yeah.
Even some of the Starfleet people who are like, well, we're like 70,000 light years from home. Why do we have to do it all that way? There's no one out here to help us. We got to do whatever we can to get home and survive. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the overall like story arc of Voyager is surviving, is Janeway doing everything she can to get her and her crew home.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good point you brought up, because I think it's finally starting to kick in now with her.
Yeah, she's got a lot on her mind,
Yeah.
I'm sure, right? Because her decision in season one with what was the name of the pilot again?
Caretaker.
Caretaker, thank you.
Yeah.
It was her decision in Caretaker to say, okay, I know this is the way home, but we're gonna destroy this ship, that would take us home. So she makes that decision. Um, and then in the Your Help part 1 and 2, I think there's a scene, and I've seen this episode kind of recently, so forgive me because I'm kind of going into specifics. But there's a scene where the Voyager is kind of resting in a nebula, and they're kind of recapping like, hey, how long is it going to take to repair this system and that system, and they're talking about it and saying, hey, we're in a nebula, and we can hide here and we're hidden. And Janeway's like, nope, we're gonna leave them in nebula. I don't want to, she can't, she just doesn't want to. We're gonna leave it. And you see the expression on um Balana's face and other people's faces are like, why is the captain doing this? They're like,
Yeah.
no. So interesting thing. That was interesting with Janeway, I thought. So, and at the very, very end, it is Janeway, she orders everyone to leave the Voyager to those other ships that they make an alliance with, but it is Janeway by herself, like on Voyager. And yeah, she's the one that runs into the time ship and kind of saves the time continuum there. She does that, but it's kind of interesting because in the end she is alone, and she's the last one on Voyager, and she meets the end of that version of Janeway, like right there. But that is man, Janeway is quite, you know, she's quite strong-willed. You have to
Oh yeah,
give that to
she
her.
really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
She has to be, right, to
Yeah.
run that ship in that situation. She has to be, I
Yeah.
think. Um, oh yeah, it's such a good episode, such a good 2-part episode, so good. And
Yeah.
I think about this episode like this, Chris. Okay, I'm gonna make a connection here.
Mm,
I'm gonna tell you what the connection is
yeah.
first, and I'll explain it real quick. There's this episode I could tie back to a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie that I really like.
Yeah.
Okay, hear me out. If those of you watching, hear me out. There's a Jean-Claude Van Damme sci-fi movie that Chris and I really enjoy called Time Cop. And in that movie, he is a time cop, right? He jumps through time, trying to find people who are messing with the timeline and things like that, because time travel has become a thing and they've got to enforce it and police it. And they're not supposed to go back and change things. But he ends up having to go back to a time. Now, his wife is murdered. His pregnant wife is murdered early on in the movie. And then it's many years later, and he has to go back to a time when his wife is alive. And he does everything he can to save her in that particular time period. In this episode of Voyager, this captain or whatever of the Krenim Imperium ship is doing kind of the same thing, right? In different way, but kind of the same thing. I bet people didn't think I could tie Jean-Claude Van Damme to Star Trek, but I did. So,
Yeah.
but no, seriously, if you think about it, put yourself in the shoes of this guy, this Krenim, leader, and your family has been killed, and you have the technology, albeit you don't know exactly how to make it happen, but you have a technology to go through many iterations to figure it out and make it happen so your family comes back. Would you do that? Would you go to whatever means necessary to do that, including wiping out entire civilizations? Or would you say, you know what, I can't do that? It's a huge moral dilemma, because you could sit back and go, oh, well, I would never kill off entire species and planets and things like that and wipe civilizations out of existence to bring my family back. It's easy to say that when you're watching a TV show, but imagine being in those shoes, right? Would you do everything you possibly could to bring your family back? I think most people would probably say yes, they would, right? So there's one of those moral dilemmas we talk about with Star Trek, right? Put yourself in those shoes of that Krenim Imperium leader. and say to yourself, well, would I do the same thing this guy's doing, or is this guy committing genocide and he's gone too far? I don't know. That's a question you have to answer when you watch that episode. But yeah, it's a great two-part episode. I think it's definitely worth taking a few extra minutes to talk about. Um, it's
Yeah,
certainly, when you talk to people who are really, really big Voyager fans, or even people who like Voyager, but it's not their favorite series, a lot of them reference this two-part episode, Year of Hell, as one of their favorites.
maybe we should do this. I was just thinking about this a little bit. Maybe we should do a deep dive on this episode because,
Like a spotlight.
yeah, spotlight. Because you got me thinking a lot. So Krenin, okay, that I forgot his name, but the Krenin
The
antagonist,
leader,
right
yeah.
there, the leader, right? So it's really interesting because um he would do anything to bring his family back, but it was his actions, actually, his actions that caused the demise of his family because it was the first use of the weapon of the time ship that caused them to be eliminated from the timeline. And he is it's interesting because there's a lot of things I like about how they describe time in this episode. He has this beautiful line that he says, it's something like time has moods, time feels, time breathes, and
Hmm.
time's alive. It was something like that, but I thought that's really beautiful. I wanted to remember it. And he also has this sense, and the way the actor played it brilliantly, I think, this sense and this feel of detachment because he's making these decisions every day. He's going, let's do our calculations. Okay, let's eliminate this species from the timeline. He's completely detached. He's not emotional. He's just making these
Yeah.
very late, very,
Cold-blooded.
yeah,
Yeah.
where,
Motionless.
yeah, yeah. And it's like this, it's kind of interesting because he's in this place right now where he's essentially a god or
Yeah.
God, right? Making these decisions on what exists and what doesn't exist. I'd love to do a deep dive on this one.
Yeah, that's great. You know, it's interesting. I was thinking about this, Chris. Okay, so if you're watching us on YouTube right now, or you're listening to us on a podcast platform, reach out to us. Let us know. We've been talking about doing like a deep dive, like a spotlight series on different episodes of Star Trek that have really stood out to us across all the different series, right? And this could certainly be one of those for Voyager, I think. Absolutely, Chris. So if you're watching us on YouTube, leave a comment below and give us your top 5 favorite Star Trek episodes across any of the series that you would love for us to do one of our deep dives like we did Star Trek Picard. And we'd be happy to take a look at that and compile that and figure out which ones, make the most sense for us. If you're listening to us, you can also email us, the random red shirt podcast at gmail.com. You can reach out to us that way and send us a list of maybe your top 5 Star Trek episodes that you would love for us to do a Star Trek Picard style deep dive on. We'll take a look at those and see what comes out. So yeah, reach out to us and let us know. But I think Year of Hell Part 1 and 2, Chris, would be a fantastic spotlight episode to do a deep
Yeah,
dive on. Absolutely. All right. That being said, let's take a look at a couple other things from season
yeah,
4. There's so many. And of course, if you're watching or listening to us and we don't talk about your favorite episode from each season, that's okay. We're skimming the wave tops here. We're just talking about a few from each season that stand out to us. Otherwise, we'd be here for 12 hours. um, so I like the episode Message in a Bottle.
mm,
And the reason I liked it is because it kind of goes back to this idea of Voyager having so many different episodes where they think they have a way to get home and oh nope, just kidding, it
oh,
failed. So Message in a Bottle is different because in this episode, 7 of 9, actually, again, another reason why she's such a critical character to the series moving forward, she discovers an abandoned subspace relay network, and it apparently has the ability to send a message to the Alpha Quadrant. Voyager figures out a way to send the Doctor himself over to a Starfleet ship that they have gotten in touch with in the Alpha Quadrant. And it's very interesting, this whole kind of interplay of sending him over there and him communicating and everything like that. It was a bit of an interesting episode. And they're trying to figure out what was there a way they can get home, and then it just doesn't work out. So that's an interesting one of those things, because we see a very similar type episode earlier in the series with the Romulan, that they communicate
yeah,
with through the wormhole, and they find out he's actually was in the past, and that led to nowhere. The micro wormhole, whatever it was. Um, I also liked Hunters and Prey. They're two different episodes, but I think they're back to back, and we get more Herosian.
Yeah.
You talk about some very intimidating alien race that is introduced in Voyager, another unique one. And I remember we talked about this in part one, Chris, about some of our favorite alien species that Voyager introduces into the Star Trek canon, in the Star Trek timeline. We get species 8472. They're not introduced, but we get a lot more of the Borg. We get the Herosian. We get the Ocampa. We get the Talaxians, those types of things. Herosian's on that list. And the Herosian are this species that is all about hunting and finding prey, and it's all about the thrill of the hunt.
Yeah.
And the reward of capturing the prey. And it's not even so much of whether or not they get the prey. It's the journey, right? It's a process of hunting down whatever it is that they're searching for, and the challenge that goes across about this hunting. And they're big, they're powerful, they're menacing in a certain regard. So I don't know what you thought of the Herosian. I really really liked this species as an introduction in this show.
Yeah, the Herosian are great, and you're right. They are menacing. They're big. The idea of hunting is completely in their culture, and there's a lot of crossover into the idea of predator, right? Then,
Yeah, yeah,
like that, and so they are doing it. It's completely part of their culture, and that's what they do as a species. And we get set up like later in some of these Herosian episodes where we have this great setup on the holodeck where they're in World War II, and
yeah,
right, I don't remember quite what season that is, but that was real. I think it was a two-parter. Again, another great Voyager two-parter, but we see um, uh, the Herosian have kind of captured the crew, and they're sending them into all of these World War II scenarios, and we get to see Seven and the captain, and Tom and Chakotay in these completely different scenarios that are really really fun to watch. This World War II scenario. So hats off and a great job to the creative team that made that happen. That was neat. But with the Herosian, what was also neat though, and what would be good to explore was you had, at least for the Herosian leaders, you had one. I think he was second in command that loved the hunt, and wanted to just keep expanding the holodecks so they could have more hunt. But you did have one of the Herosian leaders that kind of recognized that, hey, this way that we're living as a culture isn't sustainable, and we need to look for kind of other things if we want to move on as a culture, because otherwise, culturally, you know, as a species, if we keep doing this, we're kind of, we're gonna die. We're gonna die
yeah.
out. So I thought,
Like they're very one dimensional, right?
yeah, exactly. So I thought that I thought the Herosian, should they be in the Alpha Quadrant, would be a great contrast with the Klingons. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Yeah.
I'll tell you what, the
Yeah.
Herosian are so good at what they do. I'd have a hard time saying that, oh yeah, hands down, I'd pick the Klingons to win in a battle.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like you
Yeah.
you look at some of the species that are in the Delta Quadrant, and I'm sorry, I don't, people are gonna have their opinions, and I've got mine, right? It's like they're like belly buttons, everyone has one. In my opinion, there's several species we meet in Voyager in the Delta Quadrant that would wipe the floor with so many of the major powerhouse species in the Alpha Quadrant.
Yeah.
I just feel like they would. I mean, we don't get those battles, we don't really know, but I mean, there's some not so friendly, just no holds bar type species that refuse to bend to anything, and they wouldn't take too kindly to the games the Romulans play, or the over the top thirst for battle that the Klingons had. They'd be like, "Oh, you guys are just, you're all bark and no bite
Yeah.
compared to them, So I'd have a hard time picking, a lot of the Alpha Quadrant species over some of the ones that we're meeting here in the Delta Quadrant.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's neat about the Delta Quadrant is this complete like open slate that they had to create all of these species, right? And
Yeah.
so and they did get real. I think they did get really creative and with a lot of the stuff. Just like the Herosian, like species 8472. If I got that number
You
wrong,
got it.
right?
Yep,
Oh
on the
yes,
dot. On the dot, Chris. You got it. Yeah,
that's awesome.
I think it's great. I mean, hats off to the creative team on Voyager for coming up with so many unique aliens. There were
Mhm.
some that were really good, and they were very similar to other alien species we've met in Star Trek Voyager or in Star Trek in general. But there were a lot of really good ones that were unique and really important, I think, to establishing that quadrant. I mean, think about this. If species 8472 just showed up in the Alpha Quadrant, they'd wreak havoc. I mean, they would
Yeah.
decimate the Alpha Quadrant. If they can rip Borg cubes in half like tissue paper, they're gonna have no problem with the Federation ships, no problem with the Klingons or the Romulans or the Ferengi or any species, the Vulcans. I mean, you know what I mean? It just doesn't
Yeah.
matter. So really, really powerful species throughout the Delta Quadrant. Okay, what
Yeah.
else in season 4 stands out to you?
The one that was I think it was Harry and um and Tom that went down to the demon planet, and
I thought they all went down. I thought they
they
landed
all
down
got that.
there. I think they all landed on the demon planet
Oh, maybe they did.
because that ties to another episode in season 5, and then they reference being on the demon planet and it affects the whole crew. So
Isn't it? Yeah.
I think it's the whole crew that goes down, or at least
Okay.
the ship, anyways. But yeah,
Whole ship that goes down, but aren't they like my memory's a little off, but aren't they like duplicated? Something like that, duplicated by an
yeah.
alien species on that planet? Yeah.
Yeah, that shows up in an episode of season 5. Yeah, I
Gotcha.
think that episode was called Course Oblivion, I believe is the name of that
Oh,
one.
gotcha. So that one was kind of freaky, as I remember
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a good one. It was completely original. Not seen something like that before. So that was a freaky. That one stood out to me. Another one stood out. I think that probably stood out to both of us was the Omega Directive.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was neat. I don't know how you felt, but it was kind of a mystery at first, right? So it was Janeway's reaction was so they discover this molecule, or they discover something, a phenomenon,
Right.
and then Janeway goes into top secret mode. What's going
She
on?
just shuts down, right? It's like,
Shuts
nope.
down.
Yep.
Yeah, complete top secret mode, and then you realize, oh, it's this Omega particle, and there's this whole secret uh Starfleet protocol if they come into contact or discover this particle. So that was neat. I don't know that we had ever heard anything about that directive or that protocol or Omega before this episode. I don't quite
Well,
recall.
why would we? It's top secret. We
Top
don't have the
secret, right?
clearance.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
but I do like at the end where seven is a big part of this episode, and you kind of realize that that is part of what the Borg um, aspired to understand, that molecule,
Yeah.
and kind of they were seeking perfection, and to them that particular molecule like represented perfection. So I thought that was neat. What I liked about that episode was the kind of the top secretness that
Yeah.
Janeway did. I don't know if you felt similarly, but that was cool.
Yeah, it was a good
Yeah.
episode. It was very
Ah.
interesting. It, very big change to Janeway's character. By the way, like you said, she just
Mhm.
kind of changes into this like, mode, right? Where she gets into did they say something and I can't remember. Maybe I'm misremembering because this tends to happen a lot. Um, where does Janeway mention something in this episode about with the Omega Directive, and maybe it's for like something involved with captains knowing about this or something. I don't know. I don't remember
Yeah, it
exactly,
was
but
something like only the captains know about it. Yeah.
yeah, that just seems to be ringing in my head for some reason. But yeah, it was definitely a good episode. For sure. There's a lot of good episodes in season 4 we could go on, but let's move to season 5
Yeah.
as we head towards the tail end of this episode of the Random Redshirt podcast. So season 5 had some really good ones. I'd like to start out with this one, Chris. This was a season premiere of season 5, and this one's a little bit creepy, a little spooky, a little unsettling.
Mm.
Voyager enters a vast, and I mean a really vast region of space with no stars and no systems of any kind. And the crew is trying to find ways to pass time during this desolate part of space. And Janeway starts becoming very bitter as she's reflecting upon, kind of what have I got our crew into here, right? This decision to strand us in the Delta Quadrant, because I believe in the pilot, she had the choice, right, with the caretaker to be able to take her crew back, but it involved doing something that was against her beliefs, her morals, her values. And so this is unsettling because every time they look out the window, it's just complete pitch black nothingness. It's a void. It's like the word says, completely devoid of anything. No light, no stars that they're used to seeing. I mean, it would be like living your life underneath a blackout curtain with a little flashlight and you can't see anything around you. And they're in this for, I believe in the episode, they're going on months and months through this void because they can't go around it. It's too vast with no stars, no space, nothing. I mean, it's an unsettling episode a little bit. I don't know how you felt when you watched this, but this is a very interesting way to begin a season.
Yeah, you said it really, really well. So the interesting thing about this episode and the void, and you're right, they're going through nothingness, and that experience of going through nothingness where there is no external stimuli. There's nothing
Yeah.
for them to see outside. Nothing
They
them
can't go
right,
explore. They can't go land on a planet. Nothing.
right, nothing. So with that, because there's nothing external to them, then it becomes, and it has to become, all an introspective internal look that they do, almost involuntarily, but that
Right.
they're forced into doing that.
Yep.
And that is what Janeway, Janeway's affected by it most in this episode, right? So, and it's natural because she's the leader, and there's nothing external, nothing for her to do that she feels as a captain, right there. Then it becomes all internal for her, and she's going, "Who am I? What decisions have I made? The decisions, what decisions have I made that have affected the crew that are in my responsible care?" And that um, becomes unhealthy for her, very unhealthy, and she completely recludes from the crew because she can't face the crew, and I think, to me, how I interpret it, she can't face her decision, right? So, but part of coming out of that is coming to peace with her decision and kind of integrating that and facing, facing that decision, because she's focusing all on the all on the negative parts of the decision, right? Negative parts of the decision being, hey, they're so far away from home, I caused this. But she can't see some of the positive parts of the decision where, oh well, hey, I've integrated this Maquis crew with this Federation crew, and we've kind of made this family, and we've been discovering the Delta Quadrant, and we've got all this. So I think that was a very, very interesting thing about Janeway, because Janeway's a scientist. I don't think she was ever she's a captain, but I don't think she was ever a captain like a tactical or a wartime captain for the Federation, right? Yeah, and
Yeah. Scientist.
scientist. So I thought that was an interesting thing about Janeway, and you see like her act. I think it's really interesting seeing her react in these really stressful moments. So the void, it's stressful because you don't have any external stimuli. Now it just becomes all like in your mind. And then the Year of Hell part one and two, you're just under this relentless attack and dealing with all of these traumatic stuff, and you see the stress like affect her differently in that one. So the void, I thought, was just an interesting to me. I thought it was just an interesting take on Captain Janeway. um, like on how she responds, like as a person, and how she's responding to stress, and how is she going to get out of that, and what is this, what is this journey coming home actually mean for Captain Janeway? Because throughout the whole journey, like she's transforming, like you said before, right? Like she's transforming from, hey, we've got all these Starfleet protocols, and you want to follow Starfleet protocols while we're out here, to transforming to like not always following Starfleet protocols at
Right.
all. So
Yeah.
yeah, interesting.
Yeah, it was a
Yeah.
very, very interesting way to start a season out.
Yeah.
I actually like it. It's an unsettling episode, but I think you made a good point there with this idea of introspective. You can't look out now. You have to look, so you have to look in. Very good point you made there, Chris.
Yeah.
Okay, what's an episode that in season 5 that hits home for you?
Dark Frontier. Is that the one? I think that is the one with Seven of Bombs Nine. Seven of seven, seven nine. That's where we get some backstory
I
with
think so. It's a great Borg episode. Yeah.
great Borg episode, great two-parter. So I thought it was cool. I think they run into a Borg probe at the beginning, and Janeway has this idea where she wants to get a transwarp coil from the Borg, and that comes into to trying to do that. Um, and then you have through this, like you have Seven exploring her past with her parents and her childhood, and then the Queen Borg reconnecting with Seven. And
Yep.
I thought that was great, because at the end of, I think, the first part, or Seven says, "Hey, I'm going to go back to the Borg," and then you've got, Jane. You feel that Seven is rejecting Janeway, and then the next episode is about them going back and trying to get Seven back. So that was a cool one, cool two-part Borg episode.
Yeah, that was an episode that was very important to build Seven's backstory.
Yeah,
So as far as her development goes, the character as a whole and building that character, that's an important episode in season 5 for her,
yeah, yeah,
for sure.
absolutely.
Another important episode that I think is vital to the success of some of the Voyager crew in certain away missions and stuff they do is an episode called Extreme Risk. This is where Tom
Mm,
builds the very familiar, very loved Delta Flyer, and which of course is the name of the podcast for uh, Garrett Wang and Robbie Duncan McNeil, called the Delta Flyers. And so this is where that episode he builds this very unique ship that they need for future episodes, and it plays an integral role throughout the rest of the series. So another episode there. It's a fun episode,
nice.
I think, and it kind of harkens back to this idea of Tom kind of being an old school, like he was born in the wrong century, right?
Yeah,
He should have been born in the 20th century, working with his hands and wrenches and all that stuff. But he builds this incredible Delta Flyer, and it serves them wonderfully throughout the rest of the series. Definitely a big one there. I
nice.
will say something that I thought was a little bit of a heavy episode
Hmm.
here is an episode called Nothing Human. This is where B'Elanna is attacked by this alien, and it's attached it to herself. And the doctor doesn't know how to remove it without killing B'Elanna. And so he ends up going into the ship's computer and comes across this Cardassian doctor and recreates him on the holodeck and enlists him to help remove the alien from B'Elanna. Here's the problem. She was a Maquis. The Maquis fought the Cardassians. And even though this Cardassian doctor is a hologram, she wants nothing to do with him. She does not want his help. I think she'd rather die. And this kind of goes into this idea of prejudice, right? Where she has a very severe prejudice against Cardassians. And to a certain extent, you kind of understand why, because she's part of the Maquis. She's fighting against them for her life in certain regards. But at the end of the day, she still has this severe prejudice. And so she's holding this prejudice against this, even though it's a hologram, but against this doctor who has nothing to do with what she was involved with, even though you learn as the episode goes on that he actually had a lot to do He did a lot of really vile things. But the doctor realizes that this might be their only chance of saving her. And so he employs the help of the knowledge of this doctor through this hologram to help out. So I thought that was a bit of a heavy episode, right? The idea of trying to overcome prejudice against, holding the sins of somebody else against somebody because they may look like that other person. This idea of prejudice, and it's so very real still today. We still deal with it today. And so I thought that was a very poignant episode that addresses a very real issue in our world today, and a very heavy one.
Yeah, that was excellent, Zach. Yeah, that was excellent. In that episode, if I recall it correctly, it was interesting because you said, right, that doctor, the Cardassian doctor, did a lot of really bad things
I believe so.
as a
Yeah,
doctor,
remember
right?
correctly. Yeah.
So did probably a lot of atrocities as a doctor to kind of learn the information that he learned that might be able to have helped.
Yeah. I
Right?
think he experimented.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was what it was.
Yeah. So questionable and really wrong experiments to get information and knowledge to be able to help with Balana's like situation.
And I think even the doctor was pretty taken aback by some of the things he
Yeah.
learns too. He's like, oh, well, really like, oh. But at the end of the day, he also decides that Balana's life is more important than holding prejudice over a hologram.
And this is what I remember, so I might be wrong. So correct me, and maybe our viewers are wrong. But I think the doctor deletes that program of the Cardassian doctor at the end of this episode, and what I recall is interesting too, because this has so many parallels with real life and what we have done, like as humans and as a society, and through our conflicts in our lives, and particularly like in World War II, and a lot of the very very horrible experiments that doctors did uh, during World War II to torture people, and hurt them in order to
In the name of science.
in the name of science, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So I thought this is really great that you bring this up because this episode touches on all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very heavy episode.
Yeah.
When you really look into it with a really big lens, it really dives down into that, and it's something that this is where Star Trek is at its best, I think, where it really dives into these really really difficult, really uncomfortable topics to discuss. And so I felt it important that we mention it because it's not the most popular episode of Voyager. I think you could argue that I don't ever hear anybody bring this episode up as one of their favorites, but I wouldn't say it's my favorite either, but I think the topic is important in addressing.
Yeah, because even and in real life too, right? Because what this episode addresses is science, medicine, and ethics. And then
Yeah.
there's this intersection of those. And in that intersection, there's, if you think of it as a Venn diagram or an intersection, it there is an absolutely wrong intersection.
Yeah.
Absolutely wrong.
Yeah.
And then there's there's another part that can be helpful and is right. So yeah.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah, absolutely. So okay, back to the back to their episodes. Give me
Yeah.
something else that stood out to you in season 5.
Yes. Let me think. I'm sure there's some two-parters in season 5 that we've got that we haven't. Oh, well, let's talk about. I don't think this was a two-parter, but this is what I remember. Counterpoint. So that one is
Great
where,
episode.
yeah,
Yeah.
that
A
doesn't like,
little tomfoolery and some chess playing that goes
yeah,
metaphorical chess play in this game. Love
yeah.
this episode. Love this episode.
So this is where I know that there's a species that doesn't like people that are telepaths, or other species that are telepaths, and so they hunt
Yeah, the
hunt
Devore, I
them. The
think is it.
Devore,
Yeah. Yep.
yeah. And so they're chasing down the telepaths, and happens to be that they're chasing down the Voyager. But wasn't this one where Janeway and the Devore captain are? I got the sense that they had romantic interest between both of them, but they were
Yeah,
playing off each other.
Yeah,
Yeah,
once I mean, he's playing her the whole time, right?
yeah,
But like once he tries to seek asylum aboard Voyager and they start getting to know each other, yeah, there's a little bit of there's a little bit of fireworks that happen there, a little bit of chemistry, yeah.
yeah.
Oops,
That was good. That was good.
pulling down my microphone, perfect timing. Yeah.
What else do you have from season 5?
So I like the episode Latent Image.
Mm.
This is a great kind of, I think, a whodunit episode where the doctor realizes that somebody's monkeyed with his short-term memory, and he doesn't know why. And so it goes back to the idea that there was an alien race that attacked a couple of people that were killed on this away mission that he was on, a couple of young officers, and a lot of the stuff was erased. They're trying to get rid of the evidence and all this. It's a whodunit. I'm a sucker for whodunit episodes.
Yeah.
Love them. I've always loved the whodunit episodes, whodunit movies. There's a game that people play. I played it back in high school, and people do it as part of like a dinner party called How to Host a Murder, I think is what it's called. And like there's every one is a different mystery to solve, and people come over for dinner, and some people as a group they'll dress up like that era, like 1930s Chicago or something like that. And then they have their dinner and they all sit around trying to figure out who did it.
Yeah.
So, and there's the movie Clue and the game. I mean, I love whodunit stuff. So this is kind of a whodunit type of episode that I really enjoyed. We do also get Bride of Chaotica.
Oh, yes.
The classic Captain Proton episode.
Yeah.
I think that's a great one. Did you like, now, the first time I watched through Voyager, I was so about this. But did you like the episode Someone to Watch Over Me? This is where the doctor starts to mentor and give dating tips to 7 of 9.
I'm trying to recall that one. I think I did like that one. It's ironic, and
I wasn't a fan at first, but
yeah,
I'm more of a fan now just because you see how far 7 comes in a short period of time from being in the collective to now in season 5, as well as where she goes all the way into Star Trek Picard.
Is this the one where the doctor also becomes enamored with 7?
Yes.
I think. Yeah.
Yes.
What's interesting about this one is that you have the hologram giving advice to the Borg, or the new
former
human
Borg, yeah,
former Borg, on how to be human. Right. So
it's the blind leading the blind right here, dude. I'm telling you, you know what I mean? Like, just yeah.
So I think that was great. And then in the process, then he becomes enamored.
And well, the whole thing's funny, right? Because he's a holographic doctor that is literally supposed to be for emergency medical purposes. And this guy, who has no dating experience, is trying to give advice to a former Borg who has been assimilated since she was a child on how to date. It's very comical. But it's also important too. This episode's actually really important moving forward for the development of 7, for the development of the Doctor, for the role that 7 will play in Star Trek Picard. I mean, this is actually, now that Picard's over, I find this episode significantly more important than I did before Star Trek Picard.
Yeah, I agree.
So it becomes important. Go ahead.
I had this random thought. I wonder if they have emergency medical holograms on the new ships that are in Picard. I wonder if we'll find that out.
They could. The question is do the emergency medical holograms on the new ships suffer from male pattern baldness as well? Sorry, I had to. I'm sorry. I know. You're all rolling your eyes and turning off this podcast now. But yeah, I thought anyways. So, okay, Chris, we also get another 2-parter. Voyager loves its 2-parters, and I think that's one of the great things about Voyager, because most of the 2-parters are really good. So we get another 2-parter I believe this is part 1 is the season finale, I think, of season 5. And it's Equinox part 1, where Voyager discovers another Federation ship that's been abducted by the caretaker, and they run into it. But the difference, though, with the Equinox is the captain and her crew don't exactly care about anything Starfleet protocol related. They're out there to survive. I mean, they're doing things that Janeway's going, no. You know.
Yeah, this one is in the very back of my memory, but I vaguely recall that they do some shady things, don't they? Like,
Yes.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah. Yeah. We're talking like, I want to say they take prisoners.
yeah,
They do some really shady stuff, but the captain's like, look, we're out here on our own. There's nobody here to help us. We got to do what we got to do to survive. And you contrast that. I'm going to use your word. I'm going to juxtapose
yeah,
against how Janeway was when she was first out there. And it's a vastly different view. And I also look at it too like this. Okay. So both Voyager and the Equinox, now that we've met the Equinox, are stranded in the Delta Quadrant, long way from home. In this particular case, you have to think to yourself, if you're in the shoes of the captains, whether it's in the shoes of Janeway or the shoes of this other captain, what would you do? I mean, do you want to survive and get home? Do you feel as though you need to do whatever it takes to get home? Or are you more like Janeway, where, hey, we have values, we have protocols. What happens if you get home and you've done some really shady stuff that you know you never would have done had you not been in that situation? Are you able to go home and sleep okay at night? It goes back to that inter monologue, that idea of those internal values. And if you make the decision that you make, can you live with it? If it's a decision where there is no right or wrong, supposedly, maybe there isn't, and it's a matter of perspective, can you live with it? Can you go to bed that night, put your head on that pillow, and be able to sleep okay? That's kind of how I think of it in this regard. Clearly, this captain's like, no, we're doing whatever we got to do to survive and get home. What's most important is that we live and we survive. Janeway doesn't exactly see it that way. She's becoming more flexible right now than she was at the very beginning when they first went into the Delta Quadrant, but she don't see it the same way as her captain does. Not at all.
yeah, yeah. That is, you said it perfect, Zach. That is interesting because I think what when you say that and we think about like who we are as individuals and the values that each individual has and the values each leader may have like as an individual, right? Then depending on the circumstance that you're in, if you have if you're a if you've evolved to a certain part like a point like emotionally and mentally to saying, hey, this is who I am as a human being. We are a human being no matter where we are in the galaxy, right? we're
Right.
we're going to be a human in the Delta Quadrant, human in the Alpha Quadrant, human on Earth, human on Mars. What does that mean to be a human, to aspire to have certain do we have certain values, and do we hold to those certain values regardless of the location that we are at,
I was just thinking about it in my mind
yeah,
like this. Okay, you're a Starfleet officer, right? You have a certain set of principles and values. Each Starfleet officer slightly different, but the common theme there is the Starfleet values and principles, right? Picard obviously is the most probably the most drawn to those. He's the one that I feel like embodies those the most on average, right?
he's the
So you have
Jinzu.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
You have these certain these values, certain principles, core values inside of you that you believe. Are those determined by light years in this case, right? 70,000 light years. Does that all of a sudden change your core values and principles just because you're 70,000 light years from home? Or do those values and principles go with you no matter where you go? That's the question. Now, this captain, I had to look up the name because I forgot it. It's Rudolph Ransom. So Captain Ransom is the name of captain of the USS Equinox. It definitely seems that that he maybe had those values, but he's more worried about getting home. And it's very interesting because the the class ship that the Equinox is Nova class. It's the same ship that the USS O'Brien is in our Star Trek Adventures.
Yeah, that's right. It is a
It
beautiful.
is.
Nova
It's
is
a
beautiful.
really cool ship, but it's a short range interplanetary type exploratory vessel. It's not meant to be out on its own like this 70,000 miles, 70,000 light years from home.
Yeah.
Not interplanetary, sorry, short range planetary research vessel, not interplanetary. That'd make it sublight speed, subwarp speed. So there's a lot of things here that Captain Ransom's dealing with. It's like, okay, do I hold on to these values or do I kind of abandon them for the sake of survival? And it just kind of goes back to, this is a common theme in Voyager, right? The idea of holding on to values and principles or abandoning them for the purposes of survival. This is interwoven throughout the entire series, I think. But okay, let's some real overall thoughts of seasons 3 through 5 as we wrap this up and prepare for season 6 and 7 of Star Trek Voyager on our next episode of the Random Redshirt podcast as we finish out season 4 of the podcast and prepare for an absolutely jam-packed season 5. Okay, Chris, overall thoughts of where Voyager's at as we've gone through season 3 through 5.
I really feel like season 3 through 5. Now we're in this really prime spot in Voyager. We've got this wonderful introduction of Seven as a character and Seven as a counterpart to Janeway, but we've also exploring these really kind of traumatic things that are happening. We talked about the Year of Hell episode. We talked about Dark Frontiers episode and the episode where they're going through the void. So these really, really kind of traumatic things, and we kind of see these different parts of Janeway where Janeway is under extreme stress, and you see her react into different ways. So I thought it was great. These are some of my favorite seasons and favorite episodes of Voyagers, and I love that Voyager are not afraid to do these two-parters, and do
And a lot
many,
of them are
many.
really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could do a bunch of two-parters and they may not be that great, but most of the two-parters in this series are so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that they bring in species 8472 because it's so cool. I wish actually we had more of them, but that was such a great thing that they brought in. Really original dilemmas and really original species that they have in, and I thought these were great seasons. Really love this season 3 through 5. Instrumental to the season of Voyager.
Yeah.
I'll probably go watch some more episodes of Voyager after we talk. Probably watch some
Why
more
not?
tonight. Yeah. Absolutely. How about what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I didn't like the way that they removed Kess from the series. I wasn't a fan of that. I liked Kess. I think a lot of people like Kess. I think she brought a lot to the show. Really enjoyed her. I thought Jennifer Leon was really great as Kess. Bringing in Seven changed the entire show in many ways. It brought the Borg to the forefront in this series. It brought us Species 8472.
Yeah.
It brought us integrated Borg tech to upgrade the Voyager ship, which I don't think had ever been done in another Star Trek series where they had Borg tech literally all over the ship in order to, reinforce it and better defend it, give it better weapons and stuff to make it home. Had they not had that, they may not have made it home. Who knows, right? Well, I mean, they would have, because that would have been the show, but you know what I mean? If it actually were a thing. The Doctor's development, Seven's development, there were significant character developments in this show. They were instrumental in the success of the crew moving forward. I think some of the best episodes of Voyager were in seasons 3 through 5. Absolutely. So many good two-parters and so many good standalone episodes that were just fantastic. You can also see season 3 through 5, the characters are settling into their roles on the ship. Friendships are developing between Harry and Tom, between Seven and the Doctor. Neelix and Paris have they've amended things now that Neelix realizes that Paris wasn't chasing after Kess. Kess and Neelix having to say goodbye was hard. that relationship ending where Kes leaves the ship and Neelix has to let her go because of this stupid, like, oh, higher plane, because she goes from being kind of telepathic to all of a sudden being a super powerful person. That was a difficult moment there, as those two have to part ways like that. There's so many good, the relationship that Chakotay and Janeway continue to develop as she continues to rely on him and trust in his guidance and his words and his viewpoints and stuff that he's providing to her, that piece, that counterpoint. Like, I love how you said that, Chris.
Yeah.
That Seven's the counterpoint to Janeway, right? That she's constantly challenging Janeway, sometimes disrespectfully, sometimes, but she's not a Starfleet officer, right? She's a former Borg drone. But I think she's challenging Janeway also to help think differently, to look at things differently, to not always use the book, or not always necessarily play it safe, but do things that might be uncomfortable for Janeway. So I think that's great. And then finally, season 3 through 5 is filled with more and more failed attempts to get home and many more false hopes as they continue on, because they had 7 seasons, so they had to stretch it out, and they couldn't get home in 2 seasons or it'd be over. But yeah, season 3 through 5 was fantastic. Season 6 and 7 are really good too. Well, season 6 is really good. Season 7 had a few good episodes, but overall, we'll get into that the next episode. But yeah, that's it. So we're done with our part 2 look at Star Trek Voyager. We thank you guys so much for watching and listening all over the interwebs, as you like to say, Chris.
That's right.
all over the globe, the 30 plus countries that tune into us. We thank you so much for that. We will be back with another episode of the Random Redshirt podcast soon, as we wrap up Star Trek Voyager and look at the last couple seasons as a whole, give us our final thoughts. Maybe we should rate Voyager as a series from 1 to 5 comm badges.
Yeah, maybe we should.
Because that could be real interesting, right? It's not necessarily a 5 out of 5. It's not necessarily a 4 out of 5, but it may not be a 3 or a 3.5. Who knows?
I got to think about what I would rate it.
Yeah, you think? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. I think so too. I have an idea, but I'm gonna have to put some for real thought into it, because there's a lot of things about Voyager I like.
Yeah.
So anyways, yeah, this has been great as always, Chris. We're kind of getting back to our grassroots.
That's right.
Podcast here as we go through this. But we are really excited not only to wrap up Voyager and wrap up the 4th season of the Random Redshirt podcast, but also to bring you guys some more absolutely incredible content. We have some unbelievable guests that we're working on finalizing and lining up for you coming soon. We cannot wait to share that with you as soon as we can announce it. And season 5, we're going to look at Star Trek Enterprise. We're going to be doing Star Trek Strange New Worlds, an episode by episode review. We're going to have some amazing guests. Season 5 is going to be packed to the brim, Chris. It's going to be awesome.
It is. It's going to be incredible. We're really, really, really looking forward to that. As well as our Strange New Worlds. That is going to be really exciting. So
that's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
I cannot wait. I loved the first season. Season 2 from the trailer looked phenomenal as well. And we look forward to bringing that to you very soon here on the podcast. So again, thank you all for tuning in, and be sure to hit the like and subscribe button, or the bell for notifications if you're on YouTube, or the follow button, or whatever the button is on your podcast platform, to be alerted for all the latest great content. You can also check us out on Instagram and Facebook, where you can get all the latest postings from us. We like to post pictures, funny memes sometimes, announcements for episodes. So as soon as you get that announcement on one of those social media platforms, you'll know the episode's out and you can go check it out. And we also like to post other great announcements as well. So with that being said, this is it, Chris. One more episode and we're on to season 5 of the podcast.
Awesome. It's going to be a great journey. Looking forward to it. Thank you, everybody.
Yep. Thank you. And we'll catch you next time right here on the Random Redshirt podcast.